Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I thought I would take a little stroll down memory lane, see if I can remember some riffs. I'm just gonna go through, I guess, my musical journey of influences that kind of got me to where I am now. And well, we're not gonna go through all of them, but just some of the kind of key important ones. And I'll just play a couple of riffs if I can remember them, um, or if the guitar is tuned correctly for them. And I'll just try and take you along the stepping stones to on the key points, to I guess what I see as my sound now. Um, so let's start at the beginning. I'd moved to a new area. I used to live in Johannesburg City. I moved out into the suburbs, and we were unpacking. And I was like 9 or 10, I guess. And my mother saw this kid playing outside and was like, "Go make friends." And I thought he was on a skateboard, or I never would have talked to him. It turns out he was on rollerblades. If I'd known that, the whole thing wouldn't have happened because I was dork and I thought rollerblades were sissy toys, and I was a skateboarder. So I was like, nope. But I didn't realize that because my driveway was lower than the street level, and so I couldn't actually see clearly. I could just see the wheels. I couldn't really see what they were fixed to for whatever reason. And so I thought he was on a skateboard. So I went out and I talked to him. And he turned out to be really cool. And that's my good friend Adam Manning. He'll probably remember that story if he watches this video. And he introduced me to Nirvana. I'd never really heard of them before. I'd heard them once or twice, but I hadn't really paid much heed, I guess. And he introduced me to Nevermind, of course. And it had Smells Like Teen Spirit on it. And I was like, whoa, what's that? Because the record just had so much like grit and punch, and it sounded really loud and in your face. And the songs were cool, like it's a collection of really catchy songs that Kurt Cobain famously said it was like just like a pop record, really, in a lot of respects, because the songs were short and simple and catchy, and like any doofus could play them. I guess that was the vibe that it was going for, but it had all the Nirvana loud nails in the throat, screaming vocals, and the proper distorted guitars, and um, really loud drumming. And that's something I really loved about Nirvana was like Dave Grohl hit the drums so hard. I think him and John Bonham are like they probably between the two of them deserve the shared accolade of like hardest hitting drummer in history. But yeah, I just remember how hard Dave Grohl used to hit, and it's still something I love about his drumming when you get the rare chance to see him do it. Anyway, so moving along from there, so that was a guy that I met, and like I said, he lived across the street from me, but he didn't go to the same school. So off I went to school and fell in with these other guys, and one of the guys is still like one of my best friends to this day. And there was like it was him and a couple other guys, and then there's like one dude who was taller than everybody else. He was like the tallest dude in school, and we would go to his house and like shoot pellet guns at each other and blow up post boxes and do the things that like little teenage kids do or boys do, light fires and stuff like that. And he was like, "Oh, Nirvana's cool. You need to listen to this." And it was the Black record, and of course it had. And which obviously got your attention pretty quickly. But the more you listen to the Black record, the more you realize that there's a lot actually on that record that's really cool. And I know it's really popular and it's been overplayed in a lot of ways, particularly Sandman. Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, tracks like that, Sad But True. And Metallica themselves probably overplay those songs in sets. Well, they definitely overplay them in sets, I would say. But it doesn't take away from the fact that that is still a kick-ass record. And it's so well put together, so well engineered, so well recorded. And, there's some really cool magic on there. Like my particular highlights for me to this day on the Black record, if I listen to it, would be Don't Tread on Me, Holier Than Thou, Through the Never. However it goes. The Struggle Within, The God That Failed, My Friend of Misery, like the stuff that's like a little bit off the beaten track that didn't get played as much on radio. Wherever I May Roam is sort of like halfway because it also got played on the radio quite a lot. And probably got overplayed live in a lot of their sets as well, but it's still a kick-ass song. And that shouldn't take away from a song's quality. It doesn't matter how popular it was. It just matters how good it actually is when you take that bias out. And I still think I rate the Black record really highly still to this day. If you ask me if it's Metallica's best record, I think it's up there with Master of Puppets, but for different reasons. I think Master of Puppets is the better metal record, and it's probably, if you had to pick a metal record for all time to be like the metal record, yeah, that's definitely one that's in with the running. Whereas the Black Album, you wouldn't really put up for that sort of award. But nonetheless, I think the Black Album has done more for metal than any other record in history. So, and it's probably one of the best hard rock records written ever. Although I still see it as metal, I just think it's a different type of metal. It's like a mature metal that's a little bit more in rock tempos than it is in metal tempos. So it's not a fast metal record. That's all. But the best metal records should be fast, if that makes sense. Anyway, so next part of the story is, of course, when you discover something that you like, you go and you get the back catalogue. So that's what I did. Ran off to the CD store and rifled through the CDs and picked out Justice and Puppets, Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All. Took him up to the listening station. So there's like a station with like 4 sets of headphones, and they let you listen to the records and see if you like them. And I listened to the records, and I basically went in order of which ones James' voices sounded best and which ones were loudest, because I couldn't afford them all that day. So I got Justice and Puppets, and so we'll work our way backwards. So Justice, obviously, there's a lot to get into on that. Like, one would be the sort of popular tune, I suppose, really from that. But my takeaway from that record was actually in some of the clean stuff. And so, like, for the longest time, my favorite song on that record was "And Justice for All," the title track, and the clean part that opens it up. The dual guitar harmony that kind of takes the song off into its main sections, and I always liked as that started getting me into the kind of odd time signatures, which I suppose was my gateway into prog, really, for the first time. So yeah, so that started getting me into old time signatures a little bit, and like I said, the dual guitar harmonies as well really stood out for me on Justice. Particularly some of the stuff that was going on with the clean work as well. So like one, there is the first lead in it, and Hammett plays that distorted these days. Um, and I actually always preferred it clean. It doesn't matter too much. I've gotten used to it over the years, but I like that on the album that there is a clean lead on it. It makes a change on a metal record. Anyway, moving on. Of course, Master of Puppets is like the sweet spot, isn't it, for most people? Because I understood what they tried to do on Justice. They were trying to make the records louder and more punchy and in your face. And to do that, you had to get the guitars up front somehow. And at the time, it was quite difficult to do that and have the high end, the cut and clarity in the guitars, and have the drums have cut and clarity. You could either have drums that sounded like cardboard boxes and guitars with clarity, or you could have subdued guitars and drums with a bit more punch. And people were having a lot of problems, hard time trying to get all of that to fit through two speakers. And so in Justice, the idea was have a really snappy snare drum and really have a lot of high end and grind to the guitars. Turn them way up and turn the bass way down. So there is bass, but it's like buried under like 7 layers of rhythm guitar and kick drum and snare drum. But they were onto something because it did sound louder and a bit more punchy than most people's records did for the time. So I understand why they did it, and I understand why they feel a bit funny about people asking them to remix it, although I think they should, because they could just totally make it sound better these days with the compression and stuff like that we have available if they were to remix and remaster it. They have remastered it, but stubbornly refused to put bass on it. Anyway, for that reason, Master of Puppets, I think, is debatably, well, it's the better record for sure. But whether or not it would have been a different story if people thought Justice was better if they had put bass on it, I don't know. I think Master of Puppets is still the sweet spot. And I'll tell you why, because it's not as awkward. By making it a bit proggy and kind of odd time signatures and really long songs, I think they made Justice a little less accessible than Puppets. But anyway, so Puppets required learning. Of course, the moment you hear it is... Yeah, well, what a cool riff. And it taught me different things. So the moment I learned that, I learned a different way of, like handling single note passages. Obviously you've got the main one, which is switching between them. That kind of vibe, and using all your fingers, not just going. Because when you're starting guitar, that's harder. Whereas if you just take the time to like use each of them and you know what I mean, split the work up, it's a bit easier. So I learned that, but the challenging thing was the second riff. Oh, in case you're wondering why, like I don't down pick a lot of stuff, I alternate pick. That's John Petrucci rubbing off for me. If you alternate pick in a really straight line and wear your guitar high up like a dog, it's not so bad. So you can, or you can, you can get it sounding pretty tight as long as you don't play it messy this angle and play it flat that angle. Anyway, I'm just used to it. gotten lazy. Anyway, so you had that, but for me, one of my favorite songs on the record is actually Disposable Heroes, and it's one of the heavier tracks. Yeah, Disposable Heroes for me was always a cool one, and that's then started to lead me down the path. Obviously, I bought then further down the line, I bought Ride the Lightning and all that. But around this time, I started going to this music store that I ended up working at called Ronnie's All Bang and Strum It. You might have seen it in the previous video talking about my guitar collection, which I'll link above, around about now. And I started hanging out with a guitar teacher there by the name of Etienne Rudolph. And he opened my eyes. But well, my dad, who was also a guitar player, was also trying to turn me on to different types of players that weren't metal. And at the same time, Etienne was kind of doing the same thing. So he had recommended that I check out. He was like, "What do you listen to?" I said, Metallica and not much else, And he was like, Metallica's cool. And then I was like, and Pantera, because I was just getting into Pantera at that time. And he was like, yeah, but you should check out Megadeth. Their lead guitar player, Marty Friedman's really incredible. And their previous guitar player, Chris Poland, is really incredible. Really good band. You should check them out. So I did. And I was at first not into Megadeth as much because it just didn't sound as heavy to me, even though they were faster in some respects in the old days. But it was the production of the records that put me off. And in South Africa, we didn't have access to seeing them live, so it just wasn't so easy to see them from that perspective. But they had brought out a record recently around the time of the Blackout record, which was Euthanasia, and they had obviously put Symphony of Destruction on it. Really simple riff, grabbed your attention right away, and fed into a song where what was going on with the guitars and the chorus really captured my attention. It also got me onto this idea of, in a two guitar situation, being able to use the power chord and the dyad, so like a major dyad, and put those together. Let's see if I can figure out a nice way to show you what I mean. So if I do it high on the neck here, and I do this one, actually we'll do this one. Let's see, so it's going to be basically, and if it's minor, then just drop that down. And having both guitars be able to do that at the same time, and it gave you options to make the sound bigger and convey more emotion at the same time. And so I have Megadeth to thank for that. Up until then, Metallica had been teaching me quite simple riffs. Where it's sort of like a little, like, can be, well, put it this way, the riff is the star of the show, and Hetfield tends to favor, not always, but a lot of times, something that's quite direct, and it sends like a very singular message. Whereas I think when you listen to some of the early Metallica stuff, you hear Dave Mustaine's influence, which has a little bit more like chord depth to it, a little bit more emotional tension in the chords. And so, yeah, so I credit Megadeth for that. And then, of course, I went through the back catalogue and discovered some of the faster stuff. yeah, really started enjoying then, the faster material, even though I had to get used to the production sound of it. And then not long after, I heard that there was a connection between Dave Mustaine again and Kerry King from Slayer. So I thought, well, I better check out Slayer. And they had a record out at the time, and I didn't really get on with it. It had all the I can't remember what it's called now, with the kind of skeletons on the front. But then, right around that time, Diabolus and Music came out, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And I liked a good few songs on that. But later on is when I really started to get into them properly, and that was when God Hates Us All came out. So. And that again, the same thing happened. So I already had Diabolus and Music, I got God Hates Us All, and then I really was like, I should really give their back catalogue a real proper listen. I was aware of like the more popular songs like Rain and Blood and stuff like that, and I'd heard stuff like South of Heaven in passing, and yeah. That's kind of how I ended up going on to Slayer. But round about the same time as I was starting to get into Slayer, I got introduced by, again, the guys who I worked with to Dream Theater, because I'd always had a little thing for some of the proggy material, and they tried to play me 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence first, but that was like went a little bit over my head. But then I heard Scenes from a Memory, and the opening riff to Overture, 1928, caught my attention. Something like that, and I was like, that particular riff and that whole instrumental, I was like, I hadn't heard anything like that before in my life. So that started gently breaking me into Dream Theater. But then I was also like listening, because I was trying to diversify my taste. So I was listening to people talking about Steve Lukather and Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, Paul Gilbert, and all these guys, and so like I was sitting there noodling a lot on riffs, like odd ones that you would never expect from a metal guy. Yeah. Yeah, totally screwed that up. But yeah, Hold the Line by Toto, like the guys who do the Africa song. And for South African growing up in South Africa, all you heard was the Africa song for beer commercials, right? And if you're a young metal guy, you were like, that's lame, man. That's totally lame. But Toto is one of those bands that I came to like quite a lot as I got older, because I really appreciated the musicianship, the presentation of it, the professionalism of it, the sonic quality. Yeah, these are all things that I learned to appreciate as I got older and got a bit more mature. And I think Dream Theater served as a gateway into some of that and the more instrumental music in a lot of ways. Round about the same time as I was getting into all of that, and like I said, there was also like stuff like Pantera, Bruin, and Sepultura, and like who could forget Domination? I saw the Monsters of Rock in Moscow show, and that just blew me away. Never seen anything like it before or since. And I saw the Pantera footage before I saw the Metallica footage of them playing the same show. And I was just like blown away. And yeah, to this day, I think Domination, if I had to pick a song, that would be my favorite Pantera song. Anyway, one of the things that those two bands have in common, of course, is Black Sabbath. And I was never into Black Sabbath at first because I thought they sounded too slow, too sludgy, too boring. And then I heard them live, and they did a tour, what was supposed to be their final tour, around like 2001 or something like that. And I was like, actually, when they're recorded properly, and it does them justice, these guys are actually pretty heavy. But obviously you got like, riffs like Paranoid. Classic riffs, and they also taught me things like that riff taught me things about tonality. Like, so if you play things lower on the neck, they tend to be more trebly. They tend to be sweeter and rounder at the top. So I mean, like, it's simple stuff, and also like vibrato on chords. So if I play that same riff, it doesn't sound right. There's too much snap and bite. But up here, even more on the neck pickup. So it teaches you stuff like that. So I learned a lot from Tony Iommi about how to make one guitar sound like more guitars, give it more depth, and when to do those tricks and when not to, when they sounded like mud and when they didn't. And that came through because, I'd read about him influencing the other players I was listening to, like James Hetfield, like Dimebag Darrell, like Andreas Kisser. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's about it. That's where I'm going to park it. I mean, like, those bands then kind of paved the way for the bands I ended up listening to after that. I was into, a bit of Carcass and early Arch Enemy, and I enjoyed Strapping Young Lad a lot when I discovered that, which then led on to the Devon Townsend project stuff. And really enjoyed, I started getting into black metal, actually around about the same time as Strapping Young Lad. More the symphonic stuff, to be honest, for me personally, but not strictly. I like Dimmu Borgir, the puritanic euphoric misanthropia era, and can't remember the name of the fourth record just off the top of my head at the moment, but those are probably my two favorites. And I really liked like ICX Vortex and that band and that specific lineup where they had him doing the clean operatic vocals, and they had Nick Barker on drums, and they also had Mustis on keyboards. And it's not that they weren't replaceable, it's just there was a certain, Vortex wasn't replaceable, but there was a certain chemistry when it was working for them. And I understand that doesn't always last, so I don't blame them for changing things up, but that was a sweet spot for me. But I also really liked Immortal. I really liked what Demonaz did riff-wise. He's another example of a guitar player that makes himself sound bigger than just one guitar player, which I really appreciate. So stuff like, there's a riff of mine, one of my songs that sort of goes, so I've got it tuned down for this. And that's kind of straight out the black metal playbook. And that's the point. That's what I was going for at the time when I wrote it. And around about the same time, I started getting into... Actually, I'm going to have to tune down again. I started getting into Opeth. But I haven't followed them through their progressive... more progressive phase. Their more recent progressive stuff. It's too much for me. They've lost their unique selling point, which is that they used to be, I guess, one of the more intricate, melodic, and progressive death metal acts, whereas now they're a full-on progressive act, and that's cool, and that's fine, but it's not really what I'm looking for from them, I guess. They've left a gap in my life, put it that way. But I wrote some stuff which was when I was really into them, at the peak of my interest in them. And then that would go into like a dirtier section of just the exact same thing. And that kind of informed some of the sounds, the black metal and Opethy sort of melodic death metal informed some of the sounds on Vendetta and Accounted, the second record. And like I said, around about that time I was starting to really get into Strapping Young Lad, what Devon Townsend was doing. I was also into Emperor, and then obviously Emperor split, and then that became, Ihsahn kind of went out and doing solo stuff, with Emperor just doing the occasional show, but not really releasing new material. And so I stuck around to hear what Ihsahn would do, and I really enjoy his solo work, and I followed it for some time. He has also gone a little bit like too avant-garde for me at times, but for the most part he's done some pretty rockin' stuff. So that's kind of what I'm listening to at the moment. Still listening to a lot of Devon Townsend. Still really enjoying my Fear Factory. Sorry, I don't have the 7-string, but yeah. Love my Fear Factory, love my Strapping Young Lad, and the more industrial kind of Sledgehammer type stuff, and that real like end of the world apocalypse-y kind of vibe. In more recent times, I've really come to enjoy Ghost, oddly enough. I didn't think I would. When I first saw Ghost in music magazines, I was like, who the hell are these assholes? Not another masked band. But I was pleasantly surprised. I saw them at Slane Castle, opening for Metallica. And I'll be honest, I think that kind of upstaged Metallica that night. Metallica played okay. But there was something not quite right. I'm assuming some of the alcohol issues were getting to James by that point. And the crowd wasn't giving the love, I don't think. But Ghost sounded really good. They were really thoroughly professional, really tight, really on it. Great rhythm section, great vocal harmonies. Everyone in the band is just really on point, and fantastic vocals. Great songs as well, like really catchy songs. And it's not like modern heavy metal. It's more like old school rock metal, Alice Cooper, that sort of stuff. And I really do. I really enjoy that. Speaking of that, obviously I would be remiss if I forgot to mention... of Maiden. Yeah, yeah, Run to the Hills. Obviously, once I heard that, I was like, oh, I should check out Maiden. Anyway, but that was way before. That was like back between the Metallica and Pantera phase. It was probably when I did that. So I have Maiden, have Metallica to thank for me getting into them. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at today. I'm also enjoying stuff like Winery Dogs, and I'm really looking forward to that's Mike Portnoy, Richie Kotzen, and Billy Sheehan. And I'm really looking forward to Liquid Tension Experiment 3, which is coming out in March. Again, that's Mark Portnoy, Jordan Rudess, and your man from Peter Gabriel, whose name I can't quite recall at the moment. Tony Levin. Sorry, man. And of course, John Petrucci from Dream Theater. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with a riff, and I'll explain a little bit about it. So the first part is kind of And Justice for All with some speed. So kind of goes like this. And then the second part goes. And then there's a part, the second guitar plays over that. And I think that sums up really precisely the two like biggest influences on my sound, and will always be the kind of foundation for what I ended up enjoying on the guitar. And that's basically Hetfield and Mustaine. If I had to pick riffs or leads, like rhythm or lead to live with every day, it would have to be rhythm. And those two, for me, are like the godfathers of rhythm. And I think this riff is a really good tribute to both of those guys, and I thank them. So I'll play you out with that riff at full speed.